It was a quiet evening when Ethan decided to return home earlier than usual. The air outside had a slight chill to it, and the streets were less crowded than he remembered. As he approached the door of his house, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The silence that greeted him when he opened the door felt heavy, almost as if it was waiting for something to break it. Olivia was sitting on the couch, staring blankly at the television, though she wasn't really watching it. Her posture was rigid, as if she was lost in thought. Usually she would greet him with a smile or some playful comment about his day, but tonight she remained silent, almost distant. Ethan set his keys down on the kitchen counter and took a few steps toward her. He hesitated, sensing the tension that had filled the space between them. "Hey," he said gently, trying to break the silence. "How was your day?" Olivia looked up at him, her eyes flickering with something Ethan couldn't quite place. She smiled faintly, but it didn't reach her eyes. "It was fine," she replied, her voice a little softer than usual. "How about you?" Ethan felt a knot forming in his stomach. The distance between them was palpable and it worried him. There was something she wasn't saying, and the air seemed to thicken with the unspoken words hanging between them. He sat down beside her on the couch, his heart pounding in his chest. "Olivia, is everything all right?" he asked, his voice almost a whisper. She turned to face him fully, her fingers nervously twisting a strand of her hair. "Ethan, there's something I need to tell you," she said, her voice trembling slightly. The moment her words left her lips, Ethan's heart sank. "What is it?" he asked, already fearing the worst. Olivia took a deep breath, as if trying to steady herself. "Lucas, he's back in town," she began. "And he's working at the same office as us now." Ethan froze, the blood draining from his face. "Lucas?" His mind instantly raced back to the years before he and Olivia were married. He knew about Lucas, the man who had been her fiancé before Ethan came into the picture. They had a history that Ethan could never fully shake off, no matter how hard he tried. "Lucas?" Ethan repeated, his voice barely above a whisper. "Why didn't you tell me about this sooner?" Olivia sighed and shifted uncomfortably. "I didn't think it would be a big deal," she said, her voice quieter now. "We've just had a few casual lunches together. Nothing serious, I promise." Ethan's mind was spinning. He had never felt this uneasy before. Olivia's explanation didn't sit right with him. "Casual lunches?" he repeated, his tone edged with skepticism. Olivia reached out, placing her hand gently on his arm. "Ethan, it's nothing. I swear. I'm just trying to be friendly. It's been years and we're just catching up. Please trust me." Ethan pulled his arm away, standing up and pacing around the room. His thoughts were running wild. Trust? How could he trust her when all he could think about was the past, the history she had with Lucas? He had always pushed the thoughts of Lucas aside, but now they came rushing back with full force. The jealousy, the insecurity, he felt them creeping in like an unwelcome shadow. Just then, his assistant Jessica's voice echoed in his mind. Earlier that day, she had casually mentioned seeing Olivia spending a lot of time with Lucas. At first, Ethan hadn't thought much of it, but now, everything seemed to line up in a way that made him feel nauseous. He turned to face Olivia, his voice tight with emotion. "How long has this been going on, Olivia? Why didn't you tell me about it before? Why keep it a secret?" Olivia's face fell, her eyes filled with regret. "I wasn't hiding anything from you, Ethan. I just didn't think it was necessary to mention. I never meant for it to upset you." The silence in the room felt suffocating now, as if the walls were closing in. Ethan's mind was racing, his thoughts a whirlwind of doubt and confusion. He didn't know what to believe anymore. His wife, the woman he loved, was spending time with a man who had once been her fiancé, and something about it felt wrong. He couldn't ignore the unease gnawing at him. He took a deep breath, trying to calm himself. "I need some space," he said, his voice shaky. "I don't know what to think right now." Olivia nodded, her face pale. She could see the hurt in his eyes, but she didn't know how to fix it. She had never imagined that something so simple, a few lunches, some innocent conversations, could create such a rift between them. "I'm sorry," she whispered, though her apology felt small in the face of everything that was unfolding. Ethan left the room, retreating to their bedroom. He couldn't bear to be in the same room anymore, not when his heart felt so heavy. As he lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling, his mind wouldn't stop racing. The doubts, the insecurities, the questions, it all felt like a flood threatening to drown him. His phone buzzed and he glanced at the screen. It was a message from Jessica. Asterisk, just saw Olivia having lunch with Lucas again. Seems like more than just catching up. Asterisk. The words stung. He didn't know who to trust anymore. The woman he loved or his assistant, who had no reason to lie. The more he thought about it, the more his chest tightened. Could it really be nothing, as Olivia said? Or was something deeper going on that she wasn't telling him? As the night wore on, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that their relationship, the trust they had built over the years, was beginning to crumble. And he wasn't sure if it could ever be fixed. The next morning, Ethan woke up with a heavy heart. The sunlight streamed through the bedroom window, but it felt like everything was shrouded in a dim haze. He hadn't gotten much sleep, his mind unable to quiet the storm of emotions swirling inside him. He glanced at Olivia, who was still asleep beside him, her face peaceful, unaware of the turmoil brewing in his chest. He gently rose from the bed, trying not to wake her, and made his way to the kitchen. As he brewed his coffee, he replayed the conversation from the night before in his mind. The more he thought about it, the more it didn't add up. Olivia had seemed so casual, so sure that everything was fine. But Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that she was hiding something. A few lunches, casual conversations, how could those things really be innocent? His thoughts were interrupted when he heard the sound of footsteps behind him. Olivia appeared in the doorway, her eyes still heavy with sleep, but there was a certain wariness in her gaze as she looked at him. "Good morning," she said softly, though her voice seemed strained, as if she knew something had shifted between them. Ethan didn't respond right away. He was still too lost in his thoughts, his eyes fixed on the coffee brewing. The air between them felt thicker now, charged with the unspoken words they both knew needed to be addressed but didn't want to. After a few moments of silence, Olivia stepped forward, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Ethan," she began, her voice trembling slightly, "I'm sorry about last night. I never meant for things to get so complicated. I just didn't want to hurt you." Ethan turned to face her, his expression unreadable. "Olivia," he started, his voice strained. "You've been seeing Lucas a lot lately, and I can't help but feel like there's more to it than what you're telling me. It's hard for me to just pretend everything's fine when I feel like there's something you're not saying." Olivia's face faltered, and for a moment she looked away, clearly torn. "Ethan, I swear it's not like that. Lucas and I, we're just talking. We're old friends. It's nothing more than that." But Ethan wasn't convinced. He had seen the way Olivia looked at Lucas when she mentioned him the night before, the way her eyes softened, the way her tone shifted. There was something there, something more than just casual friendship. "I don't know if I can believe that anymore," Ethan said, his voice cracking with the weight of his emotions. "I keep hearing from others that you've been spending more time with him. And I'm sitting here wondering if you're still in love with him. If he still has a place in your heart." Olivia's eyes widened, and she stepped back as if struck by the force of his words. "What are you saying, Ethan?" Her voice was barely above a whisper. "Do you think I'm lying to you? That I'm cheating on you?" Ethan shook his head, his frustration growing. "I don't know what to think, Olivia. You've been hiding things from me. You're spending time with him, and I can't help but wonder if there's more to it than just catching up. And now I don't know who to trust. I don't know if I can trust you anymore." Olivia's heart sank. She could see the hurt in Ethan's eyes, the uncertainty that had replaced the love and trust they once shared. She never wanted him to feel this way, but now she realized that her actions had caused the very thing she feared the most, the destruction of their relationship. "I didn't mean to hurt you," she whispered, her voice shaky. "I swear I never wanted to jeopardize what we have. But I don't know what's been happening to me, Ethan. I've been so confused. I've been trying to figure out why I've been spending so much time with Lucas. And I can't even explain it. I think I've been trying to fill a void inside me that I didn't even realize was there. A part of me that's still unresolved from my past." Ethan took a step closer, his face softening as he saw the tears beginning to well in Olivia's eyes. "Olivia," he said gently, his tone shifting from anger to sadness. "You've been carrying this weight alone, and now it's tearing us apart. I don't know how to fix this. I don't know if we can go back to how we were." Olivia shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "I don't want to go back to the way things were, Ethan. I don't want to keep pretending everything's okay when I'm not even sure what I want anymore. But I also don't want to lose you." Ethan looked at her, his heart aching. He loved her. He always had. But this situation, was more than he could bear. He needed to know the truth. He needed to understand what was happening between them. "I need some time to think," Ethan said, his voice quieter now. "I need to figure out if I can trust you again. I need to understand if we can rebuild what we had." Olivia nodded, wiping her eyes as she tried to steady herself. "I understand," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I'll give you the space you need. But please, Ethan, please don't give up on us." Ethan didn't know how to answer. The weight of the decision was too much for him to bear, but he knew he couldn't keep pretending everything was fine. The trust between them had been shattered, and he wasn't sure if it could ever be repaired. As he turned and walked out of the kitchen, leaving Olivia standing in the doorway, he couldn't shake the feeling that their relationship, everything they had built together, was slipping through his fingers. And no matter how much he wanted to believe that things could be fixed, a part of him feared that it was already too late. The days that followed were a blur for Ethan. Work was a distraction, but even there, his mind kept returning to the same thoughts. He sat in meetings, nodded along to conversations, but nothing seemed to penetrate the fog of uncertainty clouding his mind. Every time he looked at Olivia, all he could see was the distance between them, the unspoken words, the lies, the betrayal of trust that had now become an invisible wall. He avoided coming home early, knowing that it would only lead to uncomfortable silences and awkward glances. When he did arrive, he'd find Olivia sitting quietly, her eyes filled with unspoken apologies, but Ethan couldn't bring himself to respond. How could he? His heart felt too heavy to allow for anything more than the cold distance that had crept in. On the fourth day after their argument, Olivia decided to do something she hadn't done in weeks. She took a long walk to clear her head. As she walked through the park near their apartment, she couldn't help but think about how far they drifted. Her thoughts were consumed by Lucas, by the way he had reappeared in her life so unexpectedly, and how much of a pull he still seemed to have on her. But it wasn't just Lucas. Olivia had been grappling with her own sense of self-worth, the void she felt in her heart, and the tension that had been brewing in her marriage long before Lucas had returned. She found herself sitting on a bench, her hands trembling as she held her phone. She had half a mind to call Ethan to apologize again, but something stopped her. She didn't want to seem desperate, pleading for forgiveness she wasn't even sure she deserved. And yet, as the minutes ticked by, she realized that she couldn't bear the silence any longer. Olivia stood up and began walking back toward home, the weight of the decision she had to make growing heavier with each step. She had to stop living in this limbo, torn between two men, two parts of herself that were at war. She knew that if she didn't make a choice soon, the cracks in her marriage would become irreparable. Meanwhile, Ethan was sitting at the kitchen table, his fingers drumming against the surface nervously. He had been thinking about the future, about whether or not he could move past the betrayal he felt, about whether or not there was any hope left for their relationship. The more he thought about it, the more the weight of their situation crushed him. Was it worth trying to rebuild something that might already be beyond saving? Just as he stood to grab his jacket and step out for some air, he heard the door open. Olivia was home. "Hey," she said softly, her voice carrying a mix of uncertainty and exhaustion. Ethan didn't turn to face her at first, unsure of what to say or how to react. His emotions were still a tangled mess, hurt, anger, confusion. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he turned to her, his voice quiet. "Olivia, we need to talk." She stepped further into the room, her face pale and drawn. "I know," she replied. "I've been trying to figure out what to say, how to make it right, but I don't think there's any easy way to fix this." Ethan nodded, his chest tight. "I don't know if I can do this anymore. I don't know if I can keep pretending like everything's okay. The trust is gone, Olivia. And once that's gone, can it ever come back?" Olivia swallowed hard, her eyes filling with tears. "I never wanted to hurt you, Ethan. You're everything to me. But I've been so lost, I didn't even know how to come back to you. And now I don't know if I can fix the mess I've made." Ethan could see the pain in her eyes, the regret, but it wasn't enough. The walls that had been built between them were too high now, and he wasn't sure if he could climb them. "I don't know what to do, Olivia. Part of me wants to forgive you, to move on, but another part of me is so angry, so hurt. How can I trust you again when I keep hearing about Lucas, when you're still holding on to him in some way?" Olivia's heart broke at his words. She had never wanted to hurt him this much. "I've let my emotions get in the way. I thought I was just being friendly, but I realize now that it wasn't just friendship. There was a part of me that was still drawn to him, still holding on to something from the past, and I didn't know how to let it go. But I want to let it go. For you. For us." Ethan was silent for a moment, his gaze unwavering. He wanted to believe her. He wanted to believe that she could change, that they could start over, but the fear of being hurt again, the fear of history repeating itself, held him back. "I don't know if I can just forget about all of this," Ethan said, his voice quiet. "I don't know if I can forgive you, not yet." Olivia closed her eyes, trying to hold back the tears. "I understand," she whispered. "I'm sorry. I don't expect you to forgive me right away. I want you to know that I'll do whatever it takes to fix this, even if it means losing you." The words cut through him, but they also reminded him of what they once had, the love, the connection, the bond they had fought so hard for. Ethan felt torn between what his heart wanted and what his mind was telling him. Could they really start over? Could he ever trust her again? As the silence between them grew, Olivia turned to leave, but Ethan stopped her. Wait. She looked back at him, hope flickering in her eyes. I don't know what comes next, he said, his voice shaking with emotion. But I can't make a decision tonight. I need time to think. I need time to figure out if we can rebuild this, if we can rebuild us. Olivia nodded, her heart heavy with regret, but also with a small sliver of hope. I'll give you the space you need, she whispered, and with that she left the room, leaving Ethan alone with his thoughts once more. The weight of the decision, the uncertainty of the future, pressed down on him like never before. Ethan knew that this was a turning point. What came next would shape the future of their relationship, but for now, all he could do was wait. The days stretched on, each one heavier than the last. Ethan had been trying to keep himself busy, distract himself from the tension that seemed to follow him everywhere he went. At work, he buried himself in projects, barely noticing the passing hours. But no matter how hard he tried, his mind always returned to Olivia. The silence between them, the unresolved tension, it gnawed at him, eating away at whatever peace he had left. Olivia, on the other hand, had thrown herself into introspection. She had been going to therapy, trying to understand her emotions and what had led her to the crossroads she now found herself at. She knew she had made mistakes. She knew she had hurt Ethan in ways she couldn't take back. And yet, as she sat in the therapist's office, her heart torn between the past and the present, she couldn't help but wonder if there was still a chance for them. The therapy sessions had helped her realize something she hadn't fully understood before. Her emotional connection with Lucas wasn't about him at all. It was about the parts of herself she had never fully explored, the unresolved pain from her past, the insecurity that had crept into her marriage, and the fear of being vulnerable. Olivia wasn't in love with Lucas anymore, but there was a part of her that hadn't let go of the emotional dependency he represented. And that, she now realized, was what had hurt her marriage. She had to let go of that part of herself. But letting go wasn't easy. Especially when the person you loved, who was also the person you had betrayed, was sitting just a few rooms away, unsure of whether or not he could trust you again. Olivia's mind was a whirlwind of confusion and guilt as she arrived home that evening. She had been avoiding Ethan as much as possible over the last few days, hoping that time would give them both the space they needed to think. But now she couldn't avoid the truth any longer. They needed to talk, to confront the reality of their situation. As she walked through the door, she saw Ethan sitting at the kitchen table, his face drawn with fatigue. He looked up as she entered, and for a brief moment their eyes met. It was the first time in days that they shared an unspoken connection, a quiet understanding. But it was still fragile, hanging by a thread. Olivia took a deep breath and walked toward him. Ethan, she began softly, can we talk? Ethan didn't say anything at first. He had been expecting this moment, but now that it was here, he wasn't sure what he wanted to say. The pain from the past few days was still too raw. But he couldn't avoid it any longer. I think it's time, he finally said, his voice low but steady. Olivia nodded, sitting down across from him. She reached for his hand, but Ethan didn't pull away. He let her hold it, though the gesture felt distant, like a lifeline that might slip from his grasp at any moment. I've been thinking, Olivia started, her voice trembling slightly. And I realize now that I've been running from the truth. I've been trying to fix things by pretending they were fine, by pretending that what happened with Lucas didn't matter. But it does. Mattered. And I'm sorry. I've hurt you in ways I can't undo. Ethan's chest tightened at her words. He had heard the apologies before. He had seen the tears. But the question remained, could he forgive her? Could he trust her again? Olivia, he said, his voice strained, I don't know if I can move past this. I don't know if I can just forgive you and pretend nothing happened. I thought we had something solid, something that couldn't be broken. But now, it feels like everything we built is falling apart. Tears welled up in Olivia's eyes as she squeezed his hand tighter. I understand, she whispered. I'm not asking you to forget, and I'm not asking for your forgiveness right away. I just need you to know that I'm willing to fight for us. I'm willing to do whatever it takes to prove that I can be the person you thought I was. The person you deserve. Ethan sat in silence, his mind wrestling with the conflicting emotions swirling inside him. The pain was still fresh, the fear of betrayal still gnawing at him. But there was also something deep within him, a small flicker of hope, that wanted to believe in the possibility of rebuilding their marriage. I don't know what to do, Olivia, he admitted, his voice breaking. I love you. I always have. But I don't know if I can trust you again. And if we can't rebuild that trust, what do we have left? Olivia took a deep breath, steadying herself before responding. I can't promise it will be easy. I can't promise that it will happen overnight. But I can promise that I'm committed to making things right. I want to be with you, Ethan. I want to make this work. But I need you to decide if you're willing to give us another chance. Ethan closed his eyes, the weight of the decision pressing down on him. The silence between them was thick, charged with the magnitude of what was at stake. He had never felt more uncertain in his life. But as he sat there, his heart aching, he realized something. The love they had, though broken, was still there. It hadn't disappeared. It was buried beneath the pain and the betrayal, but it was still there. Finally, he opened his eyes and looked at Olivia. I don't know if I'm ready, but I'm willing to try. I need time. I need space. But if we're going to do this, we need to rebuild everything from the ground up. We can't keep pretending that things will go back to how they were before. It's going to take work. And I'm not sure how long it will take. But I'm willing to try if you are. Olivia's heart swelled with relief. It wasn't the resounding affirmation she had hoped for, but it was enough. They had a chance, a fragile one, but a chance nonetheless. I'll do whatever it takes, she said softly, her voice filled with determination. I love you, Ethan. And I won't give up on us. Ethan nodded, his heart still heavy with doubt, but also lighter with the small glimmer of hope that had started to form between them. As they sat together, holding hands, neither of them knew what the future held. But for the first time in days, they both realized that the only way forward was together, if they could find a way to rebuild what had been broken. The days after their conversation were marked by silence. It was the kind of silence that didn't feel empty, but rather, it felt like a starting point, a place where they could rebuild if only they could find the strength to start over. Ethan and Olivia both understood that this wasn't going to be an easy road. They couldn't just go back to how things were. Too much had changed. The trust that had once held them together was now fractured, and they both knew that it would take time, patience, and a lot of work to heal. Ethan was still torn. He had agreed to try again, but every time he looked at Olivia, his mind would flash back to the moments of doubt, of betrayal. He wasn't sure if he could ever fully trust her again. And yet, there was a part of him, a small, fragile part, that believed they could still fix what was broken. He just didn't know how to get there. Olivia, too, was struggling. She had been attending therapy both alone and with Ethan, but the process was slow. There were days when she felt like she was making progress, understanding herself better, and learning how to communicate her feelings without fear. But there were other days when the weight of what she had done felt too heavy to bear. She hated that she had hurt Ethan, and she hated the person she had become when she allowed herself to get lost in her past. Still, they both showed up, every day, even when it felt impossible. They talked, sometimes quietly, sometimes with anger and tears. They argued, they made up, and they tried again. They didn't know if they would ever be the same, but they were trying to figure out if they could be something better. One evening, about a week after their first real conversation about moving forward, Ethan decided to do something he hadn't done in a long time. He came home early not to avoid Olivia, but because he needed to do something to break the cycle of pain. He knew that if they were going to heal, they needed to reconnect, not just talk about their issues, but find a way to rebuild the intimacy they once had. Olivia was in the kitchen when he entered, chopping vegetables for dinner. She didn't hear him come in, and when she looked up, her eyes widened slightly at the sight of him. For the first time in days, she saw something in his expression that wasn't filled with sadness or uncertainty. It was a look she hadn't seen in a while, hope, or at least the glimmer of it. Hey, he said softly, walking toward her. Hey, she replied, a small smile playing at the corners of her lips. What's going on? You're home early. I thought we could do something together, Ethan said, his voice gentle. I thought maybe we could have dinner, just the two of us, without all the tension. No more talking about what went wrong, just us. Olivia's heart skipped a beat. She had missed him, missed the easy, comfortable moments they used to share. She had missed feeling like they were partners again, instead of two people lost in the chaos of their own hurt. I'd like that, she said, her voice quiet but sincere. They spent the evening cooking together, their movements tentative at first, but soon they fell into a rhythm. Ethan diced the vegetables while Olivia stirred the sauce. They worked side by side in comfortable silence, the kind of silence that used to feel natural before everything had become so complicated. There was no pressure to talk about their past or what had happened. Instead, they focused on the present, on being together, on the little moments that made them feel normal again. When dinner was ready, they sat down at the table, the meal in front of them almost as a symbol of their attempt to rebuild. They ate, shared small stories, and laughed at something silly on the TV. It wasn't perfect, but it was something. Later that night after dinner, as they sat on the couch, Ethan turned to Olivia. "I've been thinking," he began, his voice softer than usual. "We can't keep living in the past. We need to move forward, but we need to do it together. I'm not saying it's going to be easy, and I'm not saying that I've forgotten what happened. But I want to try. I want to try to trust you again if you're willing to do the same." Olivia looked at him, her heart swelling with a mixture of relief and gratitude. "Ethan, I know I don't deserve your trust right now. I know I've hurt you and I can't change that. But I can promise you that I'm willing to do whatever it takes to prove to you that I want this. I want us." Ethan reached for her hand, his thumb brushing over her knuckles gently. "I want us too, Olivia. But we have to be patient with each other. We have to be patient with ourselves." Olivia nodded, her eyes filled with tears. "I can do that," she whispered. "I'll wait. For as long as it takes." And in that moment, as they sat together, hands intertwined, both of them knew that the road ahead wouldn't be easy. It wouldn't be without pain or setbacks. But they were willing to try, willing to fight for each other. They had a long way to go, but the first step had been taken. They couldn't fix everything in a single night, but perhaps, just perhaps, they could begin to heal one step at a time. The weeks that followed their quiet evening together were filled with small victories and challenges. Ethan and Olivia were learning to rebuild, to unearth the parts of themselves that had been buried under layers of doubt, fear, and betrayal. Each day was a test of their patience, their commitment, and their ability to forgive. But it was also a test of their love, and in ways, they were both discovering things about each other they had never known before. Ethan had begun to open up more. His walls, which had been so high for so long, were slowly coming down. He started sharing his feelings with Olivia, no longer afraid of being vulnerable, even though the fear of getting hurt still lingered at the edges of his mind. He realized that trust couldn't be rebuilt overnight. It would take time, weeks, months, even years, but he was willing to put in the effort if Olivia was too. Olivia, on her part, worked tirelessly to prove herself. She had severed all ties with Lucas, cutting off communication with him for good. She realized that her emotional attachment to him wasn't just about him. It was about filling a void within herself. A void that had nothing to do with Lucas and everything to do with her own insecurities. She began to focus on herself, not as the woman Ethan married, but as the woman she needed to become for herself. She continued with her therapy, took up hobbies she had once enjoyed, and worked on healing the parts of herself that had been lost in the chaos of their relationship. One evening, after a particularly long day at work, Ethan came home to find Olivia waiting for him with a smile on her face. The sight of her, standing there looking so at ease, so sure of herself, made his heart swell. For the first time in a long while, he realized that maybe, just maybe, they were on the right path. "I made your favorite," Olivia said, holding up a plate of lasagna. "I thought we could have dinner together." Ethan smiled, his tiredness momentarily forgotten. "You remembered?" he asked, his voice filled with warmth. Olivia chuckled softly. "Of course I did. You don't forget about lasagna, do you?" They sat down at the kitchen table, the familiar comfort of the meal grounding them in the present moment. It wasn't perfect, but it was enough. For the first time in a long time, they felt like a couple again, like two people who had been through the fire and were finally emerging on the other side. As they ate, the conversation flowed easily. They talked about work, about their plans for the weekend, about the little things that used to make them laugh. It was simple, but it felt right. And in that simplicity, Ethan found something he hadn't felt in a long time: peace. When dinner was over, they sat together on the couch, both of them exhausted but content. Ethan leaned back, his arm around Olivia, and for a long while they just sat there in silence. It wasn't uncomfortable or filled with unresolved tension. It was just quiet, a quiet that felt safe, that felt like home. "Olivia," Ethan said after a while, his voice serious but tender, "I don't know what the future holds for us. But I know I want to try. I want to keep working on this, on us. We've both made mistakes, but I believe we can get through this." Olivia turned to face him, her heart swelling with love for the man beside her. "I want that too, Ethan. I want to keep fighting for us, for our marriage. I know we're not perfect, but I believe in us." Ethan smiled, his thumb gently brushing her cheek. "I believe in us too." They sat there, wrapped in the quiet embrace of the night, both of them finally realizing that they had made it through the worst. There were no guarantees, no promises that everything would always be easy. But in this moment they had something that was worth fighting for: each other. The road to healing had been long and filled with obstacles, but they had made it through together. And as they looked ahead, they knew that no matter what came next, they would face it side by side. They had learned the hard way that love wasn't just about the good times, it was about weathering the storms together, about learning to trust again, about choosing each other even when it felt impossible. And in that moment, Ethan and Olivia knew that no matter how broken they had been, they had found their way back to each other. They had found a new beginning.